and welcome to AgriFocus, the podcast from Agriland that looks in depth at some of the topical issues of the day. I'm Stella Meehan and I'm joined today by Vincent Roddy, the President of the Irish Nature and Hill Farmers Association, the INHFA, to discuss GAEC 2 regulations. Now, GAEC or GAEC stands for Good Agricultural and Environmental Conditions, and it refers to a set of European Union standards aiming to achieve sustainable agriculture. Keeping land in good agricultural and environmental conditions is directly related to issues such as minimum level of maintenance, protection and management of water, soil erosion, soil organic matter and soil structure. Farmers have to respect these standards if they're in receipt of direct payments under the Common Agricultural Policy, that's the CAP. So some GAEC measures relating to maintaining a certain share of permanent grassland of the total agricultural area, others relate to preventing soil erosion, preserving soil potential through crop rotation and so on, and protecting environmental sensitive grasslands in Natura 2000 sites. However, on AgriFocus today, we're focusing on GAEC 2, which is about protecting wetlands and peatlands. So GAEC 2 is applicable from this year as part of conditionality for the Basic Income Support for Sustainability, that's your BIS. So let's start with some detail on GAEC 2. The Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine has stated publicly that the regulation is mandatory, but that it requires no additional measures by farmers. Now, apparently, about a quarter of farmers in this country are affected by GAEC 2, which department officials have said shouldn't be an issue really essentially for the majority. So, Vincent, firstly, in response to DAFM stating that it won't require farmers to take any additional measures and that certain measures won't make a difference to Irish farmers anyway, such as not ploughing deeper than a foot, for example, what's your response?
Yeah, look, there's four issues I think in particular, Stella, and it's good to get an opportunity to go over this. But there's four issues that they talk about. They're saying, firstly, they're talking about ploughing that they're saying that you can plough down to a depth of 30 centimetres, and that isn't going to be an issue. They're saying, and we'd agree with that. The other one they're talking about is reseeding. So I think they're going to allow reseeding 1 in every 4 years. Again, that probably won't be a big issue. The other one then they're talking about is drainage. So they're saying where there's existing drains, what they're saying there is that you can maintain those existing drains. And then the fourth one is down to if you want to put in new drains. So there, and obviously what they're saying that would be in line with national planning as regards the guidelines on wetlands and peatlands. Wetlands in particular, I think, is the exact definition. So around that, you have to get planning permission if you're going to drain, if you're going to put in new drains. So there is going to be a requirement there. I think now they are saying that's already part of what farmers have to do, and that's true. Of course, the big issue we would have seen with the GAEC 2 is the fact that as part of the standard, we're also pulling in over 100,000 hectares of mineral soils. These are non-carbon soils, non-peat soils, into a standard that was only intended for peat soils. So that a big part of the issue that we have on that, and look, we're hoping to meet the minister this week around that, is that issue. They're right.
Vincent, will you clarify that for me then? Are you saying that the mineral soils are now being included under the maps? Is it on the maps?
Yeah. Look, and this is where it comes to. I know as you provide your intro there. I mean, there are 9 GAECs, 9 GAECs in total, and some are applied at Lippis parcel level, but there's many aren't. And one we'd look at in particular would be GAEC 8, which is applied at a national level, and then farmers have to comply with that. So and GAEC 8 concerns designated lands, special areas of conservation, special protected areas. So that's not applied at Lippis parcel level. And what we were saying,
and just to clarify for farmers, what the Lippis parcel level means.
The Lippis part. These are the plots that would, in some cases it would be one field, it might be 2 or 3 fields. But when you get your basic payment out, you'll see there's full list down there, and each of those has a number. So they would be what's termed the Lippis parcel. So like depending on the size, look, it could be anything from a half a hectare, even less, up to a couple of hundred hectares if you're onto common. But by and large, for most farmers, you're looking at a couple of hectares per parcel, and it could be a few fields, or it could be just one. So our issue here is that the LIPIS, that it is being applied at LIPIS parcel level. And that's, what the department are saying around this is that they're saying, look, if your LIPIS parcel has 50% peatlands or more, then that brings in your mineral size. So all that land is included in that parcel. And that's an issue. And definitely it's an issue for farmers, in the west of Ireland, and definitely for farmers on hillland, because, some of the only land that may not have a regulation or a designation across it, maybe that small piece of mineral size, and now that's been brought into a standard that is at this stage going to have issues with it. And obviously, our long-term concern is whether the department do say, to point out that those 3 points, that those 4 points I made, aren't going to be draconian. We're still looking at a regulation here that could have far-reaching implications. And and a lot of farmers, definitely on hillland, that would have been dealing with designations, will understand, when we saw the designations being brought in first, they were seen to be benign enough. Indeed, some farmers almost welcomed them because they came with a good reps payment. But we now know where they're at. And our concern is that this will go there as well. And now we're bringing in mineral size into a standard that is not really designed for mineral size.
And tell me about the mineral soils. I mean, is that coming from the European Commission, or was this in already and now it's just being implemented, or is this additional soils that are now being considered?
This is additional soils that's being included.
And where did this come from, Vincent?
That's because of the LIPIS parcel. So this is mineral soil. So you're looking at 50% of your land. If you look at a parcel and say it's 6 hectares, if 50% of that, so 3 hectares is peatland, and 3 hectares are non-peatland mineral soils, then effectively those 6 hectares are now included in this standard.
Whereas it would have been 3.
Whereas we believe it should have been 3, yeah.
Let's go back to the drainage then. DAFM has said that the drain maintenance will be allowed. But let's talk, I suppose, through the nuance in that farmers don't seem to be assured by that in the sense that, okay, existing drain maintenance, is allowed. If you go for additional reclamation or drainage, you will have to go through the necessary permissions, as they said was always been the case. But farmers are feeling that, when regulation comes in, if it's brought in at a certain level or whatever, it never gets more lax. It's only when regulation comes in, it only goes in one direction. They don't relax it down the road or anything like that. So they're concerned about the existing drains they have, or what might be necessary at different times of the year, or because of different things like a storm or flooding or so on, in terms of the drainage. Are you getting that from your members?
Yeah, I mean, this is a concern, and definitely the drainage is the big one, and the new drains is the big one. And you're right. Like, when regulation comes in, sometimes it gets added to, and that is the problem. And look, this I mean, the minister and the department would say this is for a cap. So the this cap cycle finishes in 2027. But if you look at what has happened with previous cap cycles, the regulation that was there in the previous gets brought forward, and they add on new regulation. So 2027 is just around the corner. So the issue here is for farmers, definitely on the drainage, like, what is seen to be, however benign it is seen to be now, the concern is come 2027, it'll definitely be added to, and there will be concerns around that.
I suppose when it comes to the issue of drainage, which is a sensitive subject for a lot of farmers now, I mean, for years, farmers were told to try and make land productive, and they put in drains and they, they dried up land and so on. It's not all working in, I suppose, its own individual case. I mean, this whole situation with the GAEC too, while it's under conditionality, under cap, but then we also have to think about the re-wetting targets. It all kind of feeds into each other. So, re-wetting comes in under nature restoration law and under our climate action plan. And say, for example, we go ahead with our re-wetting target and it's all done on state land. But state land is not in an island of its own in this country. It borders farmers' land as well. And there's concern there that, say, for example, a farmer has a drain on his land or at the end of his land and it borders maybe state land, and they go to re-wet that state land and they close up the drain at the end of that farmer's land. There's a lot of nuance there, isn't there, Vincent, in terms of the effects that this could have on farmers?
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I mean, and you're right to bring in the nature restoration law, because obviously that's a concern. And when we wrote to the minister around that in that open letter, we outlined our concerns where this could go. And you know, I mean, a lot of the talk around the nature restoration law is about re-wetting. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. But I mean, if you look at it at a very simple level, like if we are going to have to re-wet, if land is expected to be, or if farmers are going to be encouraged to re-wet, then obviously that could have an impact, as you say, for the neighbour. But I mean, at the moment, you know, and if you look at it, we potentially, if you want to drain existing land that is subject to GAEC2, or not even, I mean, if it's peatlands, then you potentially, if it's new drain, you're going to have to get planning permission. But of course, the question is, if you're going to re-wet land, do you actually have to get planning permission? And I think that's a question that we really do need to think about. It would appear not. That's how it looks at the moment. But ultimately...
Yeah, I haven't heard of any suggestion of the planning requirement in that respect.
But ultimately, though, if as you say, if you re-wet land and it's going to affect your neighbour up the road, then surely he should, or she should have a say in what can happen to that. You know, especially if that process of re-wetting makes that land potentially ineligible to be an agricultural area, and by right then ineligible for cap payments. So that's potentially where we could end up. So your action, albeit voluntary, albeit to because it would be voluntary and would be encouraged, or that's what they're saying at the moment, could impact someone else. So I mean, there's a lot around that. And I know you're kind of moving away from where we are with GAEC2, but definitely that's a consideration. And look, the other thing, when we look at the nature restoration law, I mean, you do make a point there that they're saying that the state will be able to do it up to 2035, possibly, but we don't know. And definitely there's been a lot of promises given about the nature restoration law as regards funding and as regards targets and all of that. And they've been given by some politicians. I'm not saying the current minister, to be fair, but I know I've been seeing it by some politicians and MEPs that are still there, and they've been definitely misguided, and they haven't been accurate, and they've talked about finding money for farmers, but there's no money there. And definitely when we look at what's happening with Ukraine and Russia, I mean, I know we're going into a different sphere, but the potential of seeing a substantial fund of money coming from Europe to support the nature restoration law is quite low at this stage, I think, or probably not going to happen at all. But it does come back. I mean, when it comes back to GAEC2, we have to look at that and see that this is the line of traffic travel, and that is the problem.
And we're being told this is mandatory.
Yes.
This is not optional. The word voluntary is not being used in any way towards, the GAEC. Yeah,
well, I mean, they will make, and legitimately they can say, look, it is optional in the sense that if you don't want to avail of cap payments, then you don't have to follow that. And technically they're right. But I mean, I think for most farmers concerned here, definitely the idea that they'd forfeit cap payments is that's not something they'd want to entertain. So definitely there's an issue. The other issue, though, just around GAEC2, and I know that hasn't really been mentioned here. I know I mentioned the mineral size and the capture, but definitely, I mean, if you have peatlands at the moment, our understanding is that it's seen as, unless you get a soil sample, it's seen as Index 4. For phosphorus in your peas.
And just explain that to our listeners. Yeah. Index 4.
So Index 4. So there's five soil indexes that they're using. So 1 to 5. So an Index 4 means that it's high in phosphorus, and that would be on peat soils. So if it's going to be high in phosphorus, then the potential for you to spread your 18612s, your cut swarts, any of that, that's not really going to happen. But I mean, potentially you're also going to bring in mineral soils now that wouldn't necessarily be high. Now, I know you can get a soil sample and maybe you can get that clarified, but there is issues around that. So there is additional concerns around GAEC2 that hasn't properly been addressed. And look, we're hoping to try and get all this sorted with the minister. Maybe we're looking at a meeting potentially this Thursday. So we'd like to kind of get this addressed with them.
And Vincent, as I said earlier, all the different GAECs are mandatory. They're coming from the European Commission, but the Commission did propose a targeted review of CAP to support EU farmers and reduce the administrative burden on them under simplification. So I know GAEC 6, 7 and 8 are being looked at, and some exemptions affecting GAEC 5 are initially being looked at as well. Would you be optimistic in any way that the GAEC 2 part of the regulation could in some way be amended, edited, some of it omitted or changed with exemptions or derogations under this particular route of them reviewing it to make it simpler for farmers?
Well, we'd like to think that. Definitely. And I know that the regulation is only coming in this year. So there may be a reluctance to change
Of course, this
that.
was originally in 2021
Yeah.
at a European level, but then we put it off
Yeah.
here in Ireland, but it was to come in 2025, which is now upon us.
Which is now upon us. So, and that's the problem, like in the sense that we may have to, there may be a reluctance because they say, well, look, we don't know how this is working. But definitely we would see that GAEC2, all the GAECs should be reviewed, including that. And I think Europe definitely need to recognise maybe they've got this wrong as well. But like we'd hope as well, though, we still think that there's room to negotiate here in Ireland as regards how we apply this. Definitely to get the mineral soils, that element taken out. And I think, there's 100, as I said, there's 100,000 hectares of land that should not be included. And we have to understand that. And I think we have to also understand that if we're going to include 100,000 hectares in a standard that it shouldn't be included in, even for farmers that are not impacted by that. I mean, we're seeing now mineral soils being brought into a standard that's not designed for mineral soils. So if that happens now, where does that bring us down the road? There has to be concerns around that, because potentially, like, if we can do that once, then we can do that. Can we do that at a bigger scale later on? So I think, we always hear in farming that we have to follow, and we heard it during the pandemic, we have to follow the science. The science is clear. The mineral soils are not carbon soils, and they shouldn't be included in that. And I think when we're sitting down with the Minister on Thursday, we have proposals that we will go over with the Minister to try and make sure that soil is out. Proposals that hopefully will make this far less draconian for everyone and still work.
And could does the Minister have it in his power? Who does he have to go to? Do you have to go to GAEC? Is it back to the department to, review all of the mapping?
The mapping, Teagasc have done, and they've used the old Hammond maps. And the Minister and the department have worked with the Commission on this. So, I mean, whatever is agreed in Ireland has to be agreed with Brussels as well. So they will have the final say on that. Now, we have been in correspondence with Brussels to say basically let's hold off. And my understanding is they still haven't signed off on what Ireland has sent them. That's my understanding. So there is room still to make changes. And hopefully, and my instinct when I see where the EU Commission officials are, our instinct is that the department have them fairly well on side here. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the department might want to change what they are proposing, but they do seem to be on side, and I think there seems to be a relationship there. And I'd say that I'd be hoping that that possibility is there, that we can get it changed.
And are we unique in Ireland in terms of this? I mean, us particularly wanting the mineral soils to be omitted because of obviously our climate and our ground.
I'm not sure. I know GAC2, like there's some countries that wouldn't.
Well,
be
it applies
PFAS.
everywhere, I'd
It
imagine,
does,
but
yeah.
it doesn't. It's not as applicable
No,
in
it's
some
not.
countries.
Now, I understand in other countries, then it's not as quite. My understanding is that hasn't been the case, but I couldn't be sure of that as regards the inclusion of mineral soils. I think the fact is that if we can take it, if we can get it applied at national level rather than again back at Lippis parcel level, like it is at GAEC 8 and I think GAEC 3 or 1 I think as well, then definitely there isn't any fear of the mineral. Then we can make sure the mineral soils are not included, and there shouldn't be a fear for any other farmer as well on that.
Well, there is precedent there, as you said, with the other regulations, to review this. And for farmers who are listening at the moment, Vincent, whether they're an INHFA member or not, but they are concerned because they don't fully understand what is going to happen. All they're being told is probably a lot of what they're getting, just filtered down, and the likes of ourselves and media trying to interpret it as best we can for them. And they are concerned. But there's not really, I suppose, a lot that the individual farmers can do at the moment. It's really down to whoever can lobby to try and get something changed or something omitted, certainly in the short term now anyway.
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose for farmers first, I mean, the planners won't love us for this, but when they are going to talking to the farm advisors, I think, it's important that they bring that up. They can check the maps, they can see how their land is. Now, I know the department are talking about an appeal system for farmers if, you can get that land taken out. They're also saying that if you have mineral soils, that you can split a parcel. Um, but the problem with splitting a parcel is, well, there's two problems with that. The first one with that is that you need a feature in order to be able to split it. So in other words, you need, right, if you're two fields, that's straightforward. There's a feature there. You need a hedgerow. You could put in a fence and that creates a feature, or you need a river or something like that, or a roadway. So you do need to have a feature in order to split the parcel. The other problem, though, with splitting the parcel is that, and we've seen the problem with acres. I mean, you're now creating a different parcel. You're going to create two new parcels here if you're splitting. And that's going to give a complication with acres, because one of the big issues around acres has been trying to get the parcels to match up. We understand with the basic payment and what they
I
had.
believe, I believe there's a big internal issue in the department with that at the moment, and that's causing a lot of the delays.
Yeah, that's what we're told anyway, and I'm sure it is. So look, I mean, if I think most farmers would be very reluctant to go splitting parcels, and that's an issue. And of course, the other thing for most farmers, I mean, they're waiting patiently to get their payments every September, and the ANC in October, and the basic payment based on that. So I mean, anything that'll potentially hold up those payments, farmers would be slow to do. So, but look, that option will be there. But I think at the moment, what they need to do is, and when they're talking to their farm advisor, to ask them about where GAEC2 stands for them, if they have peatlands, and they should be able to go over the maps and show that to them, and they can make a decision on what their route is from there. But hopefully, at that stage, if we can be successful with the minister, then I think we might be able to find a solution. I'd hope.
And just before we finish up, so Vincent, the optimal solution in the view, I suppose, of the designated farmers and the hill farmers, what is the absolute, go in with your gold bucket and get your wishes granted?
We want the mineral soils out.
Yeah.
And we want farmers that, if and maybe we're looking at something around the declaration. So when you look at GAEC 8, so farmers have to comply with the requirements there, but that it's a basic enough declaration that they won't impact or undermine the integrity of what is being sought here. So I think we're looking at something around that. Whether that's achievable, we'll see when we talk to the minister.
And in that sense, it would seem from a farmer point of view that you're just trying to look at what is fair, because at the end of the day, farmers do want to comply, with conditionality. They want to get their payment. Farmers do want to protect the environment, particularly hill farmers and farmers in designated areas. It's hard to farm there, but they're very in touch with nature and they want to protect what they have too. So it's really trying to get that balance between what is required and what is fair.
Yeah, and that's what we need to do. And look, I mean, I know the department they're trying to, they have made the point, and I'd say the minister I think it was Charles had the report where they were saying potentially 100 million fines. But look, I mean, I think maybe there's a level. We've often been accused of scaremonger. I think there's a level of scaremonger going on there. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be fines, but I think we're way from that at this stage. So, I think the department as you say, we need to make sure it's fair for everyone. And, that's in our motto: fairness, not favoritism.
Well, this is it. And I suppose at the end of the day, it's about getting the commission on board. As you said, you get the feeling that there is a favourable relationship there with the commission in terms of some aspects of this. So one would hope that you wouldn't be facing those fines if you can get agreement with the commission in the first instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we'd be hoping. And look, I know, when we look at the standard, I think there is that famous footnote. I know we'd have lobbied to have that included. I think that's been quite important as well. There's a footnote because when this was first introduced, Stella, the first time we saw GAEC2 mentioned was in 2018 when we saw this as part of the CAP regulations, proposed regulations, and subsequently in 2020 and 2021 we saw we saw the regulation, and at the time they were talking about paying farmers CAP money through a derogation. And that was a problem because if you look at paying farmers through a derogation, then obviously you are implying that something's going to change here to alter how they can claim CAP payments or qualify for CAP payments. And I mean that's so when we looked at it clearly, there was a plan there. There was a proposal there that farming activity. If you look at CAP and understand how farmers get paid, they get paid because the land has to be an agricultural area and there has to be farming activity on it. They're the two basics. So if any of those changes, then potentially you're not in position to get payment. So that's why they were talking about putting in a derogation to assess those farmers. But clearly at that stage they were going to say, well, with the question we started asking was, well, what are you proposing to change here on GAEC2 that would require farmers to need a derogation? So there was a lot of lobbying back and forth, and that was in 2021 around that derogation. And we did, and look, I think we talked to MEPs, and I think in fairness, Luke being Flanagan was quite good at this, and others as well. And we lobbied, there was lobbying done in the Oireachtas as well, and all this was done across Zoom at the time. So we got a footnote put in that allows farming activity to continue. The current farming activities to continue. And that is why the department are able to say, well, it's not that bad because you are allowed to carry out drain, and you are allowed, if there's maintained drains, but if that footnote wasn't there, then we'd be in a different place entirely. And I'm not saying that we're across the line with this, far from it, but definitely the footnote helped enormously in all of that. And I think, we would have been happy enough to say that we played a major role in trying to get that included.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for on this week's episode of AgriFocus. Thank you once again to President of the INHFA, Vincent Roddy, for joining us on this week's programme. Please rate and review this podcast to ensure we can continue making informative podcasts for your audience. And please do share it with anyone who you think might be interested. Until next time, goodbye and take care.